And City Hall is urging the government to introduce tough new penalties. But at a time of cuts, should this be a problem which is treated as a priority? Andrew Cryan reports.
A man has been arrested after a woman was mauled to death in an horrific dog attack.
The death of Barbara Williams in Wallington just before Christmas was a grim reminder of what happens when a man's best friend turns.
Barbara Williams was still trying desperately to free herself from the jaws of what's been described as a huge and ferocious dog.
But until a dog becomes dangerously out of control in public, there's not a lot the law can do, unless it's a pit bull or one of 3 other types of dog identified by 1991's Dangerous Dogs Act. We joined the Met's Status Dog Unit on a dawn raid of one such animal.
Yeah, very straightforward, nice and simple. It's always better if we can walk the dog out on the slip leash at the other end when we get the dog to our secure kennels. We're going to have to do a full examination.
There's a wee bit of a struggle to get the leash on the animal, who's now in the back of the police van, will be taken to the Met's kennels and then potentially destroyed.
It is the animal we're looking for, yes. The same one that's on the photographs, and it's a nice, red-nosed pit bull.
I mean, can you tell it's a pit bull? Is it that easy?
It is for me, but I've seized about 3,000 of them.
Now, dealing with dangerous dogs is one of Boris Johnson's main priorities for policing. Since he was elected, they've created the Status Dogs Unit here. The amount of money going into kennelling has grown dramatically. And if you want to put it into perspective, in 2005, the Met seized 35 dangerous dogs. In the 18 months since the Status Dog Unit's been around, they seized 2,036. But kennelling dogs and putting the cases through the courts can be very expensive.
We've got 14 dogs in at the moment that have been in for 644 days. That's cost us £180,000, that one case. It's absolutely ridiculous money. Say, convicted, lost an appeal, still going on. In fact, as of 2 days ago, it's £180,320.
So, at a time of serious cuts in the police budget and the number of officers falling, is spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on an animal really the best use of public money? The Mayor doesn't seem to think so, and wants the police to be able to let dogs stay with their owners while cases get processed. He also wants stiffer penalties for people who have illegal dog types under the Dangerous Dogs Act, saying they should face the same punishments as people who carry a gun or knife. For some think that targeting breeds is completely the wrong approach. Despite restrictions under the current law, the Blue Cross Hospital's 3 London branches saw 7 times as many pit bulls last year as they saw in 2002. The law, they say, isn't working, and want it to focus instead on bad owners, including the introduction of dog ASBOs, or control orders as they're less sensationally known.
It identifies a particular dog that is dangerous and identifies it with a particular owner, and it will place all sorts of restrictions potentially on that dog and that owner in terms of it having to be kept on a lead, it having to be muzzled, the owner having to attend training classes to try and actually do something about the problem where it exists, as opposed to penalising a dog simply because of the way it looks.
A private member's bill is currently going through Parliament to do just that. The government too will announce their strategy for dangerous dogs early in the new year. But with cuts coming in the police budget, the ability of officers to enforce any law may well become stretched.
Andrew Cryan reporting there. Well, joining me here is the Deputy Mayor for Policing, Kit Morehouse, and the Lib Dem peer, Lord Redesdale, who's got a private member's bill going through the House of Lords at the moment. You've both got slightly different positions on this. I mean, let's hear them outlined for the moment. Your private member's bill, at core, the key measures would be what, Lord Redesdale?
The key measures would be to target irresponsible owners who don't actually control their dogs. Dog attacks can take place from any breed. We were hearing in the part there that a very large dog killed, but that dog wasn't covered under the actual specification of the 4 types of dogs. What we're saying is it shouldn't just be about those 4 types of dog, it should be about anybody who owns a dog has a responsibility. If they break the law, you can then do things to actually make sure those dogs aren't dangerous. Controlling the dog, and then if the owner is out of control, you make sure that there's penalties, and if they break those, you can take the dog away from that person. that solves the problem.
So what would it mean? You support the dog control orders?
Yes, in the bill it actually comes up with dog control orders that says that if a dog is involved in any incident, the dog can be microchipped. That then ties the dog to a specific owner. If something then happens again, the dog is seen to be out of control, the owner is then charged. However, if somebody says, well, it's not my dog, you can actually then just seize the dog immediately and maybe rehome it. And one of the problems we have, though, is the people who are owning the dogs, status dogs, often treat them badly, and it's very, very difficult to then rehouse a dog that's been treated badly, desocialised. And we have an animal welfare crisis. Battersea and all the other dog centres are actually full of dogs which will have to be put down.
Okay, I know Kitmore, the government, as we've heard, has got a consultation going on at the moment. You have submitted a response to that. What do you want to see them do?
Well, we think there are a number of things. I mean, dog control notices may have a place, but of course they're put in place after something has happened.
Yeah.
We're quite keen for there to be a lot more preventative work. I mean, we do think that maintaining banned breeds is very important. If that dog before Christmas had been a Jack Russell or a Labrador, that lady might now be alive. So we think the notion of a banned breed is very important, but we think stiffer penalties. We know that these dogs are used as weapons for intimidation in the same way as a knife and a gun, and we think they should carry much, much stiffer penalties.
It's just literally changing the kind of sentencing powers,
Yeah,
so you would have to increase the maximum penalty. There are penalties now, though, aren't there?
The maximum tariff needs to be higher. At the moment, the kind of penalties that are handed out under the Act are very, very paltry. Not necessarily for the dogs who may lose their lives, but they're quite paltry.
Not necessarily a reference to the terrible case in Wallington, because that was a breed, a type that wasn't recognised, wasn't controlled on the Dangerous Dogs Act. But at the moment, if one of those dogs were to attack somebody, and in the worst scenario, lead to a death, you could use the power of manslaughter.
Well, yeah, there are other laws, but at the same time, we think possession of one of these dogs. I mean, the problem with dealing with it when an offence occurs, like manslaughter or injury, is that you're not doing it preventatively. We don't allow people to carry guns and then only arrest them when they use them. The gun is illegal in itself, and possession carries a sentence. If we think these dogs are as capable as the gun is to intimidate and cause injury, then we should be treating them the same way. But interestingly, the Dangerous Dogs Act doesn't apply, for instance, on private land. We'd like to see that extended so that postal workers and other visitors are protected. And then finally...
And in your own home, in other words, as well. If that happens in your own home.
In your own home.
Right,
so we'd like to see that. And then finally, we would like to see a speed up of the process of dealing with these animals when they are apprehended. I mean, 80% of the dogs we pick up are banned breeds. But at the moment, there's something like 120 days before we can do anything with them. That's incredibly expensive. We're spending something like £2.5 million a year on kenneling, and while we do think this is a priority, particularly for confidence in neighbourhoods where these dogs cause a lot of fear, we would like to speed the process up.
That approach will agree, Stan.
I have no difficulty with what Kit's saying there. The issue that I've got, though, is the bill that I'm bringing forward actually does look at actually intervening at a much earlier stage. So under the bill, if the dog is seen to be out of control, you can actually then impose penalties. One of the issues is that you have a lot of people who own dogs who just don't know how to control them, and it might be that actually the dog can be made safe if the owner is taught actually to train the dog properly. That would be good. Saying that these four breeds are where all the problems are is wrong, because if any dog can be actually dangerous, and there are a large number of countries which count Labradors and big dogs. So what we're looking at in the bill is actually coming in at a much earlier stage, trying to prevent the problem happening in the first place. But in the bill, it actually has the provisions that you're talking about, which are fast.
But you don't think that this measure is the right way?
Well, I think it's part of the way. I mean, we do think there should be much stiffer penalties, as I say. We want to maintain this notion of banned breed, not least because...
Why that? Why not
because we think there are certain types of dog that are more capable of causing injury and are more aggressive than others.
Obvious, but yes, it doesn't preclude other dogs from doing it.
No, absolutely.
And are you addressing the dangerous owner or the behaviour of the person, the owner, rather than the dog?
Well, we think both should be done. I mean, as I said before, dog control orders we do think have their place. And in certain circumstances, banned breeds at the moment under legislation can be returned to owners on certain conditions. You know, that if they're muzzled, when they're in a public place, if they're neutered and they're chipped, all that kind of stuff, that can be done at the moment. So there's a kind of dog control order in place, but we do think we need to maintain that power to be able to just lift what is an unpleasant and dangerous animal off the street and remove it permanently.
Costing an awful lot of money, and we see how many dogs are being, taken in. No evidence that there are more offences out there, but you're taking more dogs out of the picture, that will come to an expense, an overreaction?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you just have to look at the numbers that we've taken, and we're only scratching the surface on these dogs. I mean, Tim, when I go out and knock on the doors and talk to people in communities, this is one of the biggest issues they raise, particularly around social housing estates, where small numbers of these quite ferocious animals can cause disproportionate amounts of alarm. And we've had a lot of
Did you see the comment from a senior officer at Kent recently, though, who wondered really whether this is something that the police, should be doing, a local authority matter? Police shouldn't do it, should be concentrating on core areas. You all know you'll be sensitive to the criticism here that at a time of cuts and needing to make savings, it may not be a priority. We know it's yours, we know you've made this a big priority, but it's not Londoners.
Yeah, well, we'd like to do it cheaper, and I would dispute that. I think it is Londoners' priority. We know from some of the feedback we've had when we knock on doors and the surveys we do, and if you look at the priorities of ward panels across the city, dangerous dogs comes up time and time again. It's not everywhere, it's confined to certain areas, and we do think it's important to do this. But it's too expensive, you're right.
But do you think
that could be made cheaper if we ironed out the law?
The simplicity of it is it's cost London £10 million over 3 years. The issue I have about it is there's been this focus on 4 breeds. Now, Staffordshire Bull Terriers, which a lot of people keep and actually can be quite dangerous if they're mistreated, are not part of this. A lot of people think they're Pit Bull Terriers. One of the problems I have with not looking at actually the owner's responsibility, but looking at the breed, is there's one thing that hasn't been mentioned. A lot of the dogs that are actually taken off the street are actually returned to their owners at the end of the day, which is not the right thing to do. What we actually need to do is say the owners have to be responsible. If they can actually suffer for the actions of the dogs, they will control the dogs.
Okay, Kit Malthouse and Louisa, we'll be returning to this, as you know. Thanks very much indeed. Now,